Welcome to the show. I'm going to bring on my special guest in a minute, and today we're going to talk about important news events which may be catalysts for Bitcoin moving forward. And I'm going to go over the charts. I'm going to talk about three of the most significant things I'm watching for in the charts that kind of will tell what's going to happen next. As always, I find the charts to be the way to engage risk, and I think they do tell a story. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to Wall Street. This is the Stocks with Josh show. It's going to be a concise video today. I'm not in my usual studio. I am in the beaches of Waikiki, a few feet away from me. Appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for hitting that like button. And if you're brand new and you're looking to better understand what's ahead for, I think, one of the most incredible wealth building assets that we've ever seen before, Bitcoin, I know people are disappointed, and retail's largely disgusted by what's happened, with the misguided expectation in some cases. But to me, the Bitcoin story is extremely exciting, and as each red candle on the weekly and monthly time frame reveals itself, I'm getting more and more interested in the opportunity ahead. Now, I just have said this repeatedly when talking about Bitcoin. This asset, just back in 2022, I called out the bottom of it at 15,500, and I said, we're getting ready to go on an incredible wealth building run. And it went all the way up to 130,000. That's life-changing money. Now, if you have not bought something since 2022 and 8 to 10x your money, well, then you're not doing it right. This is the type of opportunity that Bitcoin presents itself that can be found in Bitcoin and crypto. Now, there are a lot of ominous events have unfolded over the last couple of years. Everything from rug pull Trump coin to legislation that had promised one thing and did another. I'm going to go over the most important stories right now, which are driving the sentiment towards Bitcoin. And of course, to do that, I'm going to bring on my man. I got him in the back here. Let me pull him up. Let me assign him. Let's see if I can bring him up. There you are. He's no longer Kiwi Mo. It's
Hey, Josh.
welcome.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
In
Thank
your
you, Mark.
Hawaiian get up. You're definitely embracing the spirit of aloha there.
I talked to this guy in Waikiki who I think he's making his living off of, you could say panhandling, right? I've gotten to know him. His name is Joe. And, been connecting with him, trying to speak life over him, and just tell him that, there's opportunity for you, right? And as I walked by him this morning after breakfast, he said, Joshua, you looking very local boy today with your shirt. I'm doing my best. All right, Mark, I didn't get a chance to touch base with you before doing this because I literally just came back from a lunch with my daughter and son-in-law. And I wanted to say to you, Mark, I'm going to go through a series of important topics. And I know that you give very big overviews, which actually I love. But I'm going to hit these one by one, and I'm going to go through them. I'm going to talk about why it's significant, and then I'm going to have you comment on it. And I will give you opportunity to share your technical views of Bitcoin as well. We'll do some overview stuff at the end. So right now, an interesting story that needs to be looked at, probably the most important catalyst ahead, is still the regulatory story. We have no villain like Gary Gensel to kind of point fingers at and hate. Now we're looking at the entire system. What is Washington going to do with the crypto market, and what type of clarity is it going to give? We are looking for regulatory clarity. And you and I, during our last talk, I asked you if getting clarity regarding regulation could be a big enough catalyst to pull crypto up. And, I think that's still the topic at hand. And the time frame of that event, I'm beginning to believe more and more can play a role in pulling Bitcoin off of its lows. But let me just share with you the bottom line. Regulatory clarity. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is publicly pushing Congress to pass a federal crypto market structure bill called the Clarity Act this spring, framing it as something that would calm the markets during volatility. I'm just curious your view of it, and more specifically, when do you think it'll actually get passed? Because you know how Washington loves to delay decision making on the behalf of the people.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of fighting at the moment. Of course, Brian Armstrong is like doesn't want to support it. The Robinhood CEO, I forget his name now, he's supporting it. So there's really not a clear date or fixed date, and I think that hurts the industry overall because it feels that the Clarity Act is actually not providing clarity when there's infighting between two of the biggest crypto uh, providers in Robinhood and in Coinbase. There's not that united front that we had there. So I think this happening in a bear market is probably the best time to figure all this stuff out, because generally Bitcoin's going to drop about 70% anyway, historically. I think when we do get a Clarity Act, it really depends on, is it going to bring the clarity that people are going to look for, or is it going to create more confusion and roadblocks and red tape for the crypto industry? And I think everybody's waiting to see if the Clarity Act is actually going to bring clarity.
Well, you know what? I agree with you, Mark. And on that point, what I've noticed is I don't really get into politics much because the whole thing often, I'll be honest, it kind of disgusts me, and let's not even throw in the relationship between Washington and Little St. James. We'll put that on for someone else to cover. But having said that, whatever they name the legislation, it typically is the exact opposite as to what they're going to do. So forgive me for being cynical. Let's just acknowledge this. If the Clarity Act did get passed and it did give clarity, yes, I think it could actually have a huge. It could produce a pump and bring Bitcoin off of its lows. All right, subject number 2, or news story number 2, BitHum. I don't know if you've heard about this. Mistakenly credited their customers an absurd amount of Bitcoin due to an input error, and has been trying to basically claw it back from their customers. So imagine this is an exchange that sent out apparently millions of dollars to their customers. This now they're trying to get the money back. And so what impact does this type of activity have on the overall crypto space? Well, it just reminds all the big players that this is a very, very messy space where the exchanges don't even have the structure put in place that they would argue traditional banking does, that isn't going to accidentally give 1 million customers $1 billion worth of Bitcoin because they don't put the decimal in the right space. I'm curious, Mark, had you heard about this story? And what, even if you hadn't, this operational sloppiness is a reminder of, actually, you can take it one of two ways. For me, it's a reminder of how new Bitcoin is and how much opportunity is ahead. If you're critical of the space, then it's just like you don't want to put your money with these fools. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, very concerning that an exchange can really manipulate the price, because on that particular exchange, the price dropped to, I think, 20K.
Wow.
Maybe not that low. I can't remember. And it's to think, well, probably all these other exchanges have been doing so. And while wash trading is still legal, the price of crypto and Bitcoin can be manipulated by these exchanges via market makers and these offshore safe havens. And I think it should really concern everybody. But I like what you said. I think the silver lining is it just shows how early we are in Bitcoin. It's kind of like the Wild West, the frontier. You stake your land, you get your gold or whatever, and you manage to survive and not get rug pulled or liquidated. You could end up with some wealth there at the end of the day. However, also it just really gives another point for the skeptics and the bears, like Michael Burry, of course, who's come out saying Bitcoin's going to zero, and the Warren Buffetts, who wouldn't buy Bitcoin if you went to sell it to him for $50. Just as a real credibility issue is, I think, at stake with this, how easily an exchange was able to accidentally manipulate the price. And I think they did do it accidentally, but it was manipulated so easily by just a keystroke there. I think we desperately need regulation. We desperately need clarity, and we need the right clarity and the right regulation. Otherwise, I think Bitcoin will probably struggle to gain that credibility that it really does need in the space, because the October 10 crash, it's been all over the news. It's still in the news. Everybody's blaming Binance and CZ, and CZ's pointing the finger back, and Binance is pointing the finger back. And it just isn't a good look for the space, where people can lose so much money in their life savings because of some kind of flaw or manipulation in the system. So regulation desperately needed. But you made the point, are we going to get that clarity? That's the question. Are we going to get that regulation? Are we going to get the wrong regulation or the right kind of regulation?
Well, thank you, Mark. I always appreciate your thoughtful answers. I just want to take a minute real quick and just talk about the Stocks with Josh Discord, my pro trading community. This is where Mark is a member. He is a crown trader in that community. He has his own community, but he's a member there. He shares great plays. And I think I actually have one of the best Discords, because it's a teaching Discord and also a trading and investment Discord. We actually have 10 weekly live trading sessions and around 5 teaching sessions on the weekend. So you can find it by going to the website, which is the same name as the show. It's www.stockswithjosh.com. You can also find Mark on his YouTube channel as Tribal Trades, and you can go subscribe there over to him. He's worth following, and I've always loved his commentary. And in addition to that, he's on to the stock game now, because with stocks like SanDisk and Hood giving the returns like these 10x moves that we've had with companies like Palantir, that all of the degens that used to thrive off of the risk in crypto have come over and joined us stock guys. And and I actually love this, and this is one of the main points or takeaways from this video. Before I even get into the charts, I want you guys to know that I don't think the bottom's in. Okay, the bottom is not in my opinion, but this is the time. This is the time to buy, especially if you are a retail guy and you can't drop 50, 100K at the right perfect time at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night when it bottoms. If you're not in that position and you have a day job that you're working right now, trading time for money, today's the perfect day. In my opinion, it's not a suggestion for you to buy, sell, or hold. I'm not a financial advisor, and every dollar you put into Bitcoin could go to zero. But in my opinion, this is the time when I tell my kids, what are you doing with Bitcoin right now? This is when the blood is in the streets, even though Warren Buffett wouldn't touch it. I don't know if he would approve of us buying Bitcoin. But the fact is, every single time you have purchased Bitcoin, when the price was underneath the 200-week moving average, you made a ton of money later. Now, I can tell you, I search for stocks and cryptos all the time, not so much crypto right now, to invest in, to get a return in. And I've got money that I've got to deploy. And, when I look at it, I have to look at what is the opportunity ahead. Could I 1x my money? Could I get 20%? When I'm looking at large cap companies like Google, I'm looking at getting 10, 15, 20%. 30% if it gets wild and crazy, right? Especially because it's run up quite a bit, and possibly over the next 5 years, if the AI story continues to run, and they continue to be the market leader in that space. I know you're like NVIDIA is or Palantir is. Google might be. If they emerge to the top of the list, then I'm sitting there going, I might be able to take this and I might be able to double my money. And it's more secure because it's a large cap player. But very rarely can you invest in something like Bitcoin that's proven itself cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle that's not giving 100%. It literally went from 15K to 130K, almost a 10x move. Very rarely can you get something like that. And so when do you buy? Well, you buy when it's beneath the 200-day moving average. When do you buy Google? Well, you buy when it's beneath the 200-day moving average. So, I have kept exactly to the game plan that I communicated to everybody weeks ago when I predicted that we would flash crash down to 60,000. I predicted that when we were above 80,000. I said, and it's happening very soon. It actually happened days later. And I did what I didn't do is I wanted to double and triple my daily buys as we went down 5K at a time. Well, I didn't really
Mm.
get a chance to. I had daily buys turned on and it dropped right down to my level. And then I bought a big chunk. Okay. So I bought a big chunk and then I tripled my daily buys. So I've also told you guys in a recent video, actually, I think I made some notes and didn't share this with you yet, that roughly this period of time in which we're going to be under the 200-day moving average, it might be 150 days total before we emerge back above. Don't take that as like a hard prediction. I'm just comparing it to previous timeframes in which we have lived price-wise underneath the 200-week moving average. Okay, so we have a very limited amount of time. You could say 5 months maybe is a possibility. And the question that I had to ask myself is, if I'm interested in being invested in this, and this is the bottoming area, not the topping area, it's definitely not the topping area, then how much money can I deploy over time that's going to put me in a position that I'm not ever going to sell this again? I'm going to sit back as we continue to hit these new highs over the coming years and let Michael Saylor convince me that it's going to be $48 million a coin. The joke is going to be that I'm not going to spend any of this. It's only going to belong to my kids. Well, you've got 164 days potentially to make that decision. And for me, I kicked up my daily buys. It's over $1,000 a day, and I'm buying it every single day right now. Now, I'm not making a suggestion for what you should do. I've done this long enough to know through 2 other cycles. I've done this long enough to know that you have to create a buy strategy and you have to work it. Now, here's one of the reasons why I'm being a bit more aggressive this time around and started earlier. Because one thing that we've learned, and I'm not going to debate the 4-year cycle today, I'm not going to debate the super cycle, I've got some other important things to go over. But one thing we've learned is that in this last cycle, and I'm going to get Mark's opinion on this in just a second, in this last cycle, we can all acknowledge that things moved quicker, okay? We got to a brand new high before the halving. That had never happened before. Okay, and we've had a pull down flush, in my opinion, a little bit sooner than I was expecting, and so this gives me the feeling that things are moving faster than they had before. We may not go down as far as we have in the past, and we may get there sooner. That's my current thought process. Okay, and we got to take into consideration the macro. I'm going to get into that dialogue in a minute, but Mark, I'm just curious right now on your, and we don't have to agree. I know that you're being, you're a chart guy like me, and you may be planning strategically to buy at a different time. What is your plan right now with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'm not a buyer right now. I'm a trader of Bitcoin. So, get in at 66K, ride it up. If it keeps going, I can stay in. So I feel I get the benefits if we get some kind of a nice bear market rally. But I also think it's going a lot lower, as you do. So I'm not buying at this level, but I'm also hedging myself by trading it so that I don't miss out on any potential moves to the upside in case it does something a little bit different. And look, the fear and greed index got to 5, Josh. In Bitcoin's history, it's never gotten to 5 ever before. And it got to 5 and it scared the pants off people because of how quick it moved down to 59K.
That's what
All
I'm
right.
talking about.
So, however, I have a couple of concerns. One concern is it really got there without any major black swan. And in the past, that's been an FTX or a Do Kwon with the Luna Terra collapse. The other 3 exchange, we haven't even had a major exchange go under yet in this cycle. We haven't had Michael Saylor, and listen, I'm not a fan of a guy that gets busted for fraud 20 years ago for lying and defrauding people and then gets busted again for fraud and has to pay the biggest fine in Washington, D.C. history. And he got MicroStrategy employees to help him defraud and forge documents and got caught 2024. So 20 years later, he's getting caught again. What else is he doing that he's not getting caught for? This is a ticking time bomb, in my opinion, that there is a character flaw there, and he owns 3% of the supply. Now, I think with MicroStrategy, it's not a matter of if, but when. Now, it might not be this bear market, it might be the next. I'm not sure, but I think this whole thing's going to unravel. And of course, the Bitcoin price is going to come down with it and bring buying and generational opportunities. Now, I remember this happened with Solana, and nobody wanted to buy it because FTX, like MicroStrategy, was a massive holder of Solana. And when the FTX debacle happened, Solana unraveled. And while people were saying it was going to $3, I was buying it at $8, $10, and $12. Okay. But I waited till it got right down there with Bitcoin at 15. So I think I'm concerned that I haven't seen the black swans like the Mount Gox or the Silk Road black swan events and collapses of exchange. And we're seeing such quickness and speed of Bitcoin dropping. Now, think historically, where do I think likely Bitcoin might come to? And of course, I'm saying this without knowing what black swan or white swan events. I mean, imagine if the US government does buy Bitcoin and add it to its reserve. That changes things, of course. But if it drops 75% like it did last time, that takes us to 38K. Now each time it's not dropped by as much, so each time it's around 5 to 7% less. So let's just say, maybe 75% takes us to 30K, maybe 70% takes us to 38. There's a CME gap at 42,000, and we know they often get filled. And by the way, there's one at 20,000. I don't want to scare the pants off everybody. I'm not saying it will be
This
filled.
is exactly why the FUD has gotten the fear to 5%.
Josh, and
it's you, man. It's you.
We have to consider it. I like 42. It's a 65% drawdown. It's 42K. There's a CME gap there. There's a lot of support there. It was about this price 4 years ago on Valentine's Day. It was about 40 odd 4,000 or whatever. So look, I just think that, and I'm not saying that 42K would be the bottom. I just think it's going a lot lower than what people will expect it to go. And it's going a lot lower than I expected it to go. I really did think it was going to bottom around where we are now. And so I've been taken by surprise on that. I'm surprised we didn't get more of a dead cat bounce. Where did we go to, Josh? We got to 97K and then collapsed. And that so far has been the dead cat bounce. Is that going to be it for a dead cat bounce? Or are we going to see a rally up to 100K? I'm feeling it's less likely. I think right now the rally might be back to 84K where we dropped down from. And really the market makers are not giving people an opportunity to get out of their plays. And so many people, this was the biggest thing that I heard across Discords and YouTube. People were waiting for a bounce to get out. And I just think a lot of people are still stuck and trapped in their position and down heavy in crypto. And it's tough.
Yeah. So I want to share a couple more news stories, and then I have a couple comments I want to get to, and I want to get to some charting. But I also wanted to throw out the conversation regarding the miners. I got a couple guys out there who follow me that they get a little upset when I don't cover the miners. And I think that something that's happening with the miners right now is worth talking about. And I want to present both the positive and negative of it. I'd love to hear. I can't wait to get your opinion on this. But so Morgan Stanley basically came out and they basically have been calling the miners a buy because they're now part of the AI story. They're converting from Bitcoin to being part of the AI data center overall story. But now this kind of creates, I guess you could say, a dilemma that it also begins to tell some of us that perhaps Bitcoin isn't enough of a business strategy for the miners to reach success and profitability, that they've got to now diversify to other sectors. Otherwise, they could be in trouble. And so largely, I think it's bullish for the miners, but I think it leaves some questions regarding the overall success of Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that? Is it a mixed signal? How do you interpret it?
I think it's smart for the miners to diversify because when they're in a bull run, they're very profitable and they can switch their resources to Bitcoin mining. And in a bear market like we are now, they can really build out the whole AI side of things and continue to move with both. I think it's it's a sign that, you know, they're doing it for survival. I'm not necessarily saying, well, you know, agreeing with whether it's a buy or whether it's not a buy. What have we got? We got Iran, we've got Cypher, I think there's Wolf, and there's a couple of others. You know, kudos to them. You know, hats off to them, and yeah, appreciate the shout out for the World Series champion LA Dodgers. And I do need the glasses to see, so so I appreciate the shout out. Others can't see, but so look, I've been keeping a very close eye, particularly on Cypher and Wolf, and they've had some good moves while Bitcoin has been going down, and they're not overly expensive stocks. So I think there could be some value in there, and there could be a bit of a dark horse. They're worth keeping an eye on, Josh, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. In this area, we agree. I think that they're actually interesting now again. And I said a long time ago that I would talk about the miners when they became interesting to me. And I think that this diversification has given
Yeah.
them a better story. And I think that the AI connection can help maintain the price, and then Bitcoin will come. You know, when it begins to turn around, it'll simply add to the profitability, which means that we might see. Now, I want to be very clear. We didn't see return to the highs this last cycle for the miners. They didn't make brand new all-time highs. The one reason for that makes 100% sense is the dilution. You can't expect it to get
Yes,
back to $80 when there's twice as many shares have been put out there.
that's right.
But I would say that I think the miners are going to have a better future, and it's worth us all putting them on. And like Bitcoin, maybe even considering some nibbling strategy over the next 90 days. 3 months to 5 months is when I think this stuff is going to really begin to get its momentum moving. And I think at that point, people are going to, a lot of retail always gets accused of coming tardy to the party. They're only excited to buy it when it's at its highs. I think the miners are well positioned with their relationship to Bitcoin, as well as this new relationship to AI, to be on all of our radars. They're obviously small cap, and so small cap, small position size. You don't want to go all in, but you know, if you heard me talk trash on the miners in 2025, I'm turning a leaf of casting a more rose-colored light on them in 2026. All right, let's talk about one more interesting news story called related to BlockFills. This is an institutional crypto lender, a liquidity provider that has suspended their deposits and their withdrawals after the recent Bitcoin slide. And the problem with this is the kind of headline that begins to spook investors, especially institution and retail. Neither one of them like it. It basically means we got your money, we're not giving it back. And when you signed on to transfer your money to our exchange, we basically had in the notes and the details that your money was our money. And if we go bankrupt, we're going to pay our creditors first, and if there's any money left over, we'll give it to you later. You know, Mark and I saw that in the last fall. We saw that with FTX and a lot of other players. I called out a couple big players in that winter of 2022. One of them went Gemini. I called it out like 3 days. I said, guys, get your money off this exchange. I said, it's going down. 3 days later, and people didn't believe me, and they didn't listen. And literally 3 days later, it was locked for eternity, and they weren't able to get their money off. And you know, they said, "Oh, Josh, I heard you. I wish I had listened. I had $300,000 worth of Ethereum, and now it's gone, locked up for years." So this is the first smell or hint of this that we got with BlockFills, and I want to use it as a reminder that I'm perfectly okay, like Mark, to be trading Bitcoin right now. There's money to be made for the alts to go down right now by shorting them. And, you know, I short them with leverage, and I don't suggest that you do that. You got to learn that business. It's a whole other trade. You got to learn those risk scenarios. You got to learn what type of risk you can manage. I mean, you might be able to manage 3x. I might be able to manage 7x. There are people out there. I heard one time the statistical average of leverage trading for crypto, Mark, I don't know if you ever heard this before, was the average. This is mind blowing to me. The average was 100x. And, you know,
I mean,
I
you're
don't
just
know.
asking to be liquidated with a very small move at
Yes.
that level. And Josh, you make a good point, and this is something I think is very important. I'm glad you brought it up. I had this on my mind. I didn't write it in my notes, and I should have. But we have to be careful because at least 4 exchanges went under in the last bear market. It's a very risky time to have your money on any exchange. Even the ones like Binance you think is safe. It's always better to move the asset. If you're buying Bitcoin, to move it to maybe a cold wallet. it, I'm not the biggest fan of cold wallets, of course, because people can lose their seed phrases and stuff. But and we're not here to advise which cold wallet or to do this. But I think just for each person to consider not getting caught. I mean, I there was a few thousand that I got. I got most of mine off, but some of it got stuck in transit, and so that money's still stuck there. I haven't even claimed it back. It's a small number. It's a few thousand, but it's still, at the time, it was a significant amount of money to me. So more significant anyway. So I think that that's just something to be aware of, that we just haven't seen a major crash of an exchange. And really, we pray and hope that we don't see one. I am seeing some warning signs and rumors out there. And I think everybody just to be very careful and aware about where they're holding their crypto. I'm here holding very, very little on exchanges. And of course, I'm only trading it with leverage. So I'm just really getting in a trade, making money, taking profit, rinse and repeat. So that, look, what if the bottom was 59? What if we had this flash quick crash down to the 200-week moving average? We missed it by about 1,000. And, I know that the USA technically has a Bitcoin reserve, but that was all stuff they already had. They haven't made any new purchases. Anything can happen. I think it's unlikely, but I think I'm hedged either way by trading Bitcoin and crypto. There's a few other alts like Tau that I get in trades in and out and whatever, and just being patient to wait for those capitulation events. I feel like I've hedged myself, so I'm not overexposed on exchanges, so I'm not going to get burned. If exchanges go down, there was a lot of, how much came off Binance, like 26 billion of withdrawals, and then they froze and halted withdrawals for some time. We just don't really know what's going
Scary,
on
scary,
there.
scary moment. At that time,
And if
FTX
Sailor goes
Binance
under,
were the big players.
there's going to be a
Let
lot
me
of
wrap up this
exchanges
point. Let me
that
wrap
go
up
under
this
with them.
point by saying this here. One, I cannot advise you. I can only tell you the way I feel about this situation. I use BloFin. I have a BloFin account, a BitGet account, and a MEXC account, and I've got smaller sums of money. What's small to me could be inheritance or a fortune for someone else. But
Yeah.
I am not putting any of my buy and hold assets on those 3 exchanges. Those exchanges are tools for trading only, with a very specific amount of money moderated over there. So if I build up that account, I pull money off and I leave a trading balance there only. Now, I personally feel safe with Coinbase. They're the custodial arm for a number of the Bitcoin ETFs on Wall Street for BlackRock and other companies. So I personally feel safe with Coinbase. They're a publicly traded company, which means that they have to show their books and they have to qualify and validate their position and what they're doing with the money. So that doesn't mean that they're safe. And I don't want you to come back to me a year from now if it explodes and you say, Josh, you said it was safe. No, I said I felt comfortable holding Bitcoin on that that environment. I also feel comfortable with some of these other solutions. I feel comfortable with the Bitcoin ETFs, right? I also feel like I got an accumulation of Bitcoin on PayPal, because they offer that as a service. The fees are terrible. It's kind of costly, but I don't feel, they're a publicly traded company. Again, I feel comfortable holding projects there. I do not and would not want to accumulate Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Solana on MEXC, BitGet, or BloFin. Those are for trading purposes only, as far as I view it. All right, real quick. I want to go over I want to get into the charts here a little bit, and I'm going to talk about 3 important topics. Now I'm traveling, and I've got my laptop and a little screen here to my left, so just bear with me, guys. Let me see if I can pull this up. I'm going to talk about some things that I think we all need to be aware of. Okay, so when we were camped out right here, I told everybody, I said we're getting ready to have a huge flush down. And you have here, this is the Bitcoin chart. It's the weekly time frame, and this is the 200 weekly moving average. And I just want you guys to kind of understand some dynamics here, okay? The last time that we got to this level, it was a nice little flash crash. And at this point, people did not believe the Bitcoin run was over. We had a little flash crash, and we pulled up off of it, and we spent a couple weeks moving sideways. We lost it again, and that's what officially brought us into the winter. Now, I want to point out some percentages. After we lost the 200 weekly moving average back in 2022, we spent, this was where we spent about 160 days or 5 months before we came. Imagine this being the water line, and you spent 5 months under the water till eventually Bitcoin came up for a gasp of air. And it then spent a number of months sort of building above the 200-day moving average and consolidating before we went on to rip, okay? So right now, if we're looking at this from a sort of where are we at historically, we are right here. We're at this exact same spot. You come back over here and you can see that this party of pain has potentially just begun. For me, guys, this is the buy zone. So I can tell you that if we get one more leg down, and I'm going to make this point about that, how far did Bitcoin fall from the 200-week moving average once it hit it and eventually closed on the weekly time frame beneath it? Well, the last time it fell to around 34 additional percentage points, okay? And that brought us from 27,000 to 17,000. So we lost about one third of the overall value. But we know that if all of us had been super excited about buying every single day or week when price was beneath the 200 weekly moving average, then we would have ended with largely a 20K average price per Bitcoin. And, you know, it would have been the most beautiful ride as this thing went up. I'll pull the average from 20K. Let me do this for you guys. We would have gone up from 20K, right in the middle of that buy zone. We would have gone up 532%. And so just do the math.
Yeah.
If you had bought $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, or averaged it because you turned on daily buys underneath the 200-week moving average, you would have had, if you had $100,000 worth of Bitcoin on average when this down party was over, you would have had $532,000 within the window of 2 years. Within 2 years, you would have 5x'd your total money. Not bad. So you can understand why I look at this and think to myself, the buying party has begun. And, you know, now where could this possibly go? Let's do some similar percentage drops. Here we are at the 200 weekly moving average. Let's pull this down. There's 28% down, okay? Now, as we have been rising in the value of Bitcoin, we know that the moves are less volatile. The most extreme view is that we could potentially drop 28% from this current price. And I'm going to give you some analysis as to why. It aligns with this previous dip here. So we have support there. And it aligns with the tops back here. So previous resistance becomes support. Where is this number? Well, it's right around 50K. Now, I'm not saying we can't go lower. I'm just saying that if we do get to 50K, that's when I've got to start doing some lump sum buys. And this is only if you're excited about Bitcoin. Let me jump into the RSI real quick, okay? Because I think it's important that you guys the RSI should help guide the way. Give me a minute to pull this up. Let me get rid of the MACD. Make the RSI easier, right? I predicted the flush through not the crystal ball. Nancy Pelosi didn't return my phone calls. Michael Saylor was only bullish. But I predicted it because we were right here in a very similar spot. We had come down, and I said, guys, we're hovering above the 30. It's going to act as a magnet on the weekly time frame. It has every other time, and every single time we're right here, we have a hard flush. It's one of the biggest flushes of the Bitcoin move. And it happened here last cycle, I said, we're getting ready to do it again, and it's going to happen here. Now, actually, from this point forward, Bitcoin actually traditionally begins to build. The worst of the down momentum is over, even though the price begins to fall still. the momentum is never as strong after on the weekly time frame it hits the 30. So that is what is referred to as bullish divergence. Now you guys have heard me complain about bearish divergence. That's when the price is going up while
Yeah.
momentum is going down. Well, now we're in the phase where momentum stops going down, but price continues to go down. So guys, I'm going to make something simple clear. I'm never like, this isn't magic over here. I'm using the most basic understanding of the charts to have an objective view of what's going to happen in the future and what I should be doing with my money. And that's the type of stuff I teach. What often happens for people that don't get this right is they get the story in their head. And instead of just trusting the charts, they start thinking about what is being said. I'm not saying we should ignore the fundamentals, ignore the Clarity Act, ignore block fills, locking up Bitcoin. Just understand we've seen all this before. And, for me, it's about following the charts. Now I'm going to get into one more dynamic of the chart. I'm going to get into the structure that we see. Actually, maybe I'll just turn that over to Mark. Mark, there is a ton of structure on this chart at 50K. Yes, there's the possibility of having a deeper move. I'm going to challenge that idea of yours with this qualifier. Not that you're wrong, but what that is dependent upon, and I think that you could answer this in a yes or no answer, it's dependent upon more black swan events, which are somewhat typical in the trading world and in specifically the crypto world, which would be, I don't know, they lock up, they go after Binance, and they crack down and they
That would be
find.
bullish, Josh.
That
If
would
they
be
go
bullish.
up the
Yeah. That would be bullish. That would be bullish. Let's think of negative things. Michael Saylor, I
Sailor, get
agree
your
with
liquid
you
back.
that he's a problem. Michael Saylor is holding Bitcoin back. I agree with you on that. And I also believe that people don't really change. It's actually why I made some commentary regarding the FIG IPO, because the founder there had done some not nefarious things. He had just had some failed business deals. He had basically launched these big products only for them not to go on and become market leaders. Not illegal things, but more just not successful things. I think people they stay the same, and I think that he is a drawback to the crypto space. And yes, something like that could bring crypto or Bitcoin to a place where it's unexpected. Here's the thing. I trust that Mark will buy strategically at that moment. I don't trust the rest of retail. Retail will be scared out of their mind. And, I've had a lot of people, one of my favorite success stories is Mike, Money Mike in the Stocks with Josh Discord. He actually got some of his seed money that he invests and trades with today. He actually got it from listening to a video that I did back in 22, which said buy $25 of ADA and a handful of other cryptos every single week. I said, and we're going to 200x them at minimum between now and the next bull run. And that registered with him, and he started doing it. I'm not going to say by faith, but with hopeful optimism, he invested in those. Yeah. And then he jumped ship when I talked about bailing on ADA and that it was underperforming. And I said, let's throw our ADA money into SUI. He did that, and that went up, 5x. And so I'm just telling you, in my opinion, don't rest all of your plans on, the collapse of strategy and its impact. Don't try to get I'm not saying that we've hit the low. We've not hit the low on Bitcoin. To me, I just showed you guys that once we're under the 200-week moving average, you can go down 24%. But a lot of you need to hear that if you don't put a choice pattern and decision-making in your finances to begin to look at, is this a space that's worth investing in? This is the time frame to make that investment. You're not going to sit there and set aside $25 a week into a savings account. You won't have the guts to buy on that dark hour. You might think you will, but I've done this long enough to know that you have to make those decisions in advance, and that they hurt on the day that those moves come to pass, those opportunities come to pass. They're extremely painful to do if you hadn't decided in advance. What are your thoughts, Mark? And then we're going to wrap this show up. I'm going to talk about XRP because there's an interesting news story there that I think people have to hear.
Yeah, look, I think So far, Bitcoin's playing out exactly pretty much like every other cycle. It bounced at the 100 EMA on the week, which was around 84K, had its dead cat bounce to 97K. I was a little surprised it didn't at least get to 100 before rejecting and then coming down to around the 200 week. And then, yes, generally, once the 200 week moving average is lost, and it's sitting at about 58K right now, we do come down a lot lower. But at the same time, the fear and greed index didn't have much further down to go at 5. So generally, that's been a good trading opportunity. I wouldn't say buying opportunity, a good trading opportunity. Do I think that the dead cat bounce to 97 was a true and worthy dead cat bounce, and maybe we'll have another one? Yeah, possibly we could have a bounce up to 84 there where we broke down from before further capitulation. Also, the funding rate went negative, Josh, and with Bitcoin that doesn't really happen, and that usually presents a buying opportunity for people for at least a local bottom. So I kind of put the two and two together, the extreme fear at 5 plus negative funding have generally been good times to trade Bitcoin. In a bull market, it's generally good times to buy Bitcoin. In a bear market, a good time to trade Bitcoin, unless, of course, these come at the cycle bottom, which is usually about 500 days before the halving, which is going to be about October of 2026, where generally is another good buying opportunity. And I like to buy on the way up, because I'm a momentum trader. I trade the trend. I look for bullish reversals. I look at the RSI, the stock RSI, the MACD, and I look to find that move on the way up. And I know you're the same. Your number one rule of trading is to trade the trend, and you're a huge MACD guy. And I added that to my little tool there, thanks to you, and your education on that was brilliant. And that really does help try to, and look, I don't want to try and pick bottoms, because those who try and pick bottoms get smelly fingers, as I always say, and people go, but it helps people remember. I don't mind buying, like you said, it made a really good point. You could buy at 15, but you also could have bought at 18 or 19 and it would have been just fine. You know what I mean? But you would have had more confirmation on the way up, breaking back up over the 200-week moving average. So actually, you could actually buy as you go back up over the 200. And I'm not saying we should wait that long, but I think that people are trying to time the bottom all the time. What I'm looking to is to identify when there's been a reversal and then get in and to buy at those levels. And for now, I think extreme fear plus negative funding for Bitcoin. There's a trade there. I've already made money on that trade. If for some reason it falls apart, I'm good. And if it keeps going, I'm still good as well. So I feel like my strategy fits my personal trading strategy and approach to Bitcoin. And I think if people are out there, I read some people in the comments that they're also dollar cost averaging, and that's fine as well. You have to find the strategy that you feel works for you, and the time you have available, the money you have available, the kind of schedule that you have.
And can I
Maybe you can't watch the Bitcoin charts all the time. And Josh is right. If you bought at the 200-week moving average, either on the way down or on the way up in any cycle, you would have been extremely profitable, even if you hadn't got it right at the bottom, which we do think it's going to go a lot lower.
Yeah, I just want to stress that my communication is to the retail audience. We're not talking to Wall Street right now. And
Yep.
I know that they only get excited to buy things that are red hot and going higher. I've got friends that I've tried to introduce to Wall Street, and I've heard funny things over the years. When matter of fact, I'll give you a good example. I won't call out any of my friends' names, but when Bitcoin was right around 20K, and I think it was 22K, 24K, and I had a good friend of mine, talking about a Sunday afternoon picnic kind of a friend. And I was sitting with him, and he said, "What should I invest in, Josh?" And I said, "Dude, you need to get your position in Bitcoin. This is going to 100K. At bare minimum, I said it's going to 80K." And his mom had passed away, and he had some money, right? He had some money, and he ended up buying at 20K. And he didn't have a long-term vision because it ran up to 24K, and he said, "Josh, you were right. Man, that was amazing. I'm loving this." And he sold, right? And and then I was like, I think Bitcoin was like 60K about a year later. I moved away from where I'd been living and hadn't spoken to him. I said, dude, how you liking this? How you liking these Bitcoin bucks, my friend? He's like,
Mm.
oh, Josh, I wish I had held. So when I'm
Yeah.
speaking to you guys out there, I'm speaking to folks that maybe are not doing this full time. Okay. Like Mark, I have bigger chunks of change. Like when it was sitting up at 84K, I didn't buy a big chunk. When it hit under 60, I dropped and bought a full Bitcoin, right? And I've got daily buys turned on. And if we hit 60 again and we hit 50 again, I'll buy bigger chunks. But for people that are not watching the charts, just like Mark said, you've got to start looking out. What are you going to invest in? What can you invest in? Now, you should not put all your money into Bitcoin. You should have a long-term view based on your age as
Mm.
to what is conservative. Give Wall Street some money to work, because when money gets put to work on Wall Street, when you go to sleep at night, it's working all around the world. Apple's making phones, Apple's selling phones, Apple's selling apps. So if you buy them, your money is working 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You're going to get tireder and tireder the older you get, and you're going to want to work less and less. That's why you got to take some of that money that you make now and start putting it into something that will work with no need to sleep, right? That's why we invest all together. And in my opinion, Bitcoin has proven itself, okay? And you're going to hear a ton of FUD over the next 5 months, okay?
Yeah.
Everything from strategies going to fail to exchanges are dropping left and right and people couldn't
Yeah.
get their money out, and that Bitcoin is old tech, quantum computing is going to annihilate it, and AI
Yeah.
is going to unwind
And
it. And
Josh,
yes,
why are they going to hear all that FUD? Because the smart money, the big money that's sold at the top, want to get it much, much lower. One of the big attractions for Bitcoin is that it's on Wall Street, of course, with the ETF, but it's volatility.
yeah,
And they can trade that volatility and win off that volatility. And that's why we're going to hear to scare all of retail away, so these big money can come and scoop up Bitcoin real low. That's why I think it's probably going a little bit lower than people expect. And then I think it will go a lot higher. I do see a big long-term vision for Bitcoin, of course, but I think that, this is why strategy is so important. If you've got $100 to spend on Bitcoin or 10,000, would I be using 5,000 of it at these prices? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm not buying any at these prices. I'm just trading it. But I just think everybody to have a strategy that they've really thought out. And I think one of the things that you say over and over again to people that's not spoken enough, before you get into a trade or a buy, have a plan. Have a plan for that trade. Nobody goes out to build the house not realizing they don't have enough materials to finish the house. So when we get into a trade, as Josh will say, and I say a lot now, because that really is truth, is to have a really good trade plan of what happens if it goes to this price, what happens if it goes to this price. So look, we can expect the best, but we can also prepare for the worst if we get a really big black swan event. And I tell you, MicroStrategy collapsing with Sailor, Bitcoin could go down really, really, really low there. And
well,
that's my biggest concern, that
I
he
want
holds 3% of the supply.
yeah, I agree with you. But I want to make a possible prediction that goes against the fear. Okay, so I recognize all the truth of the fear. I've counted the cost of buying a range, which I know may not be the
Yeah.
bottom, and I'm telling you isn't. But let's see if the charts suggest that a different path could unfold. Partly, one of the concerns I have is that everyone is so used to these long drawn out winters
Mm.
that and
Yeah.
major black swan events which collapse the price even more. We might have something else going on. Now,
Yeah.
we gotta be
True.
open minded to the fact
I
that
agree.
so let's go look at the chart for that idea. Let me just share this with you, Mark. And this will be interesting because, Mark and I are friends, and it's always fun when we do these videos together that we can reflect back on what each of us said. And let me go show you. Bitcoin 2018 is it's the a scenario that I think is interesting and worth playing out. That particular cycle had an incredible run. The price was way away from the moving averages, and we had an incredible run this cycle. It came down and it did the same thing that we failed to do recently. In the 2021 Bitcoin top, we back tested that 50 and 200 before going lower. Okay. But in 2018, it really had a very tight drawdown, not quite giving the back test that it had. And right when people thought it still might come up, it had this incredible flash. Now watch carefully. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of that. It hugged the 200 moving average for quite a while, not giving that bigger drawdown that we saw in 2021. It hugged this, largely staying range bound, very close to that. And then all of a sudden, it had a very, very late rally. Okay. And it almost looked as if it was going all the way back to all-time highs. Okay. This would be like a move to 110,000 if it were to occur today. And then when everybody thought that, super cycles in play and Bitcoin, the 4-year cycle's broken, when retail got excited again, it came back one more time for this very grueling drop and test of the 200 before going on to make the 2021 high. This is the exception to the rule. Every other time, the price stayed significantly below that blue line until emerging later. What was this secondary drop? Well, it was COVID 2020. What could bring the price up now? It could be if we were to do something similar to this and take everybody by surprise and just keep melting and melting and melting up. It could be the Clarity Act. It could be that it goes sideways for the next 3 months. We get the Clarity Act, and it looks like it's going to go all the way back up to the top. Then we have the midterm elections, where it just somehow gets caught up in a market of turmoil, the macro, and going risk off causes it to fade back. We may not have this bow underneath the 200-day moving average. Let's go back and look at some of the surrounding timeframes. Like here, when we got underneath the 200-day moving average, it was 160 days of price action underneath until it slowly emerged, back tested, and went higher. But we got to remember that isn't what happened in 2018. And so this window of buying opportunity that most people that are interested in this space are imagining, this window of buying opportunity underneath the 200-week moving average. What if through a different macro and a different environment, that just doesn't happen? And we actually linger for a short amount of time around the 200 before ripping and leaving a lot of people behind. And by the time retail gets sucked back into buying, then they get faded again. So this could go, I know that's a lot of scribbles on the chart, but it's a warning. It's a warning. Why am I going to be happy? I'm going to be celebrating. And that's what happens. Sometimes I come out here celebrating my successes and other people are mad. They're like, Josh, you're gloating. No, I shared a plan that I won't be disappointed. If we drop, I won't be disappointed because I'm going to be averaging. If we go up, I won't be disappointed because it makes sense to buy under the 200-week moving average. So for his history and posterity, I'm letting you know that this may not go the way it's gone in the past. There is precedence for the 200-week moving average being a area where we bounce. And I don't want you guys coming back here midsummer when the Clarity Act actually does a surprising thing and brings clarity. And this thing is back up at 105, and then you start buying again. And then people may get hurt a second round and even get more frustrated. Final thoughts on that market?
Yeah, I'll add that, even though you're buying Bitcoin, I'm just trading at the moment. I'm not a buyer at the moment, but I feel I've hedged myself for a situation like you say. I do want to give a bull case because I have been a little bearish here. The liquidation heat maps, which show where exchanges and market makers would make millions and billions of dollars if price was to move to those liquidation levels and people would lose their money because they're over leveraged on that 100x Bitcoin trading, like you pointed out earlier in the show, there is a lot above, a lot of liquidity above. And Josh, if I'm the market maker, I'm going to get that. I'm going to go up because there is hundreds of millions, billions of dollars there that they can scoop up and put in their pockets while wash trading is legal. They can go ahead and do it. And all
Yeah.
they need to do is
Marks.
buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and it's going to
Hmm.
liquidate the short traders, which will liquidate the 75x traders, which will liquidate and it's just a domino effect that goes all the way up. And there's liquidity, there's some heavy liquidity right up to about 110,000. There is around 100 million just on Binance alone, sitting back at 125
And
there.
I like
And
something
so
you said,
that does
I
give
like something you said
some
there. While this
support.
is unregulated and while it's not subject to wash sales, there's a motivation for more chaos and volatility
Yeah.
right now that may not be
Yeah,
there
before it's
next.
made illegal. If it is made illegal, they won't be able to do that as easily. And this could be their last chance. And maybe that's why they flushed it down so quickly and so early. And maybe they're going to flush it up quickly. And so it does give a little bit of support there to your theory that potentially we're going to have a quicker and shorter bear market and come out of it a whole lot quicker, or at least we're going to have a decent bounce. Now, that's not to say, look, and I'll just add this one thing because I want people to understand how the market makers work. They can't take price up unless they have enough contracts. They need more and more people going short to have enough. It's like fuel for the fire. It's like you don't want a missing domino piece. Otherwise, when the dominoes fall, it stops. Once they have enough contracts of people who've gone short and overly bearish, they can then send the price up, and then it just acts like dominoes on the way up. So we may stick around these areas and even go a little bit lower, go back to 60K and get a little bit more bearish before they take it up. But at some point in this bear market, I think the market makers, I don't think they're going to wait till October, November to go and get that money. I think they're greedy and they're going to want to get it sooner. Look, I'm not giving here financial advice because I'm not a financial advisor. This is just for education and entertainment. But if I was a market maker, maybe we could do a show. If I was a market maker, that's exactly what I would do. I
I
would
like
stay
the idea.
bearish for a little while longer until I have enough contracts, and then I would take it up and I would just put in my jeans all those billions and billions of dollars of all those over leveraged traders.
Well, just for reference, the price once it closed underneath the 200-week moving average, it made its low 3 weeks later, and then every week after that, it was basically building some compression
Yeah.
to rip. And when it built that
Yeah.
compression, most people were seeing it as an opportunity to add shorts as it was backtesting
Yes.
200, expecting price to collapse, but instead it ripped almost all the way back to the highs. And so I hope now, this is all for you guys to let you know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what my decisions are. But you got to really process it because I'm not going to come out here and tell you what to do. Two more very
Yeah.
important things to go over before we wrap up the show. I always try to keep it within an hour. We didn't quite do that today. One, I got to shout out Stock Up with Larry Jones, who told me, he said, Joshua, stop making videos with your bed, your hotel bed not made in the background. He said, that's not professional, my man. So Larry, yeah, the bed's made. The bed's made there. Number two, I got to shout out to Stockmo. So someone here in the chat told me, did you hear that Stockmo purchased 900,000 of XRP last night? I'm going to call him about that. That's incredible. I want to hear that from the opposite of KiwiMo. I want to hear that from Stockmo himself. I'll look into that. That's fascinating. Personally, the only alt that I'm buying, and this again is not a suggestion for you, but Solana, I've got a chunk being bought daily that for some would be considered significant. For me, it's in par with my investments. But I'm buying it daily, and I don't think it could go down an additional $20. But again, I'm looking to the future, not to. This is when you buy when things are beneath the 200-day and the 200-week moving average, especially the weekly. That's when you look at investing, and that's why I'm looking at big tech companies too. I started to notice, and you're going to hear me do a lot of videos this week. I haven't been buying big tech recently, but there's stuff that's starting to look attractive. Hood is starting to look attractive. Coinbase is looking attractive. Some of the miners are looking attractive. Meta and Microsoft are looking attractive. Amazon is looking very attractive. And so everybody else is kind of a little bit gun shy because of this meltdown. And I'm not saying that, that the floor can't fall out from underneath, but these would be investments. And, we're getting to prices that make sense to make risk decisions. And that's normally the time when nobody's comfortable to make those type of investments. And I did a video back at the beginning of 2025, or no, it was in April. I think it was 10th. And the video was titled Buy, Buy, Buy. And it was right after the big dip of the 7th and the 9th. And I got so much criticism. And why did I get criticism? Because on April 10th, we didn't go higher on the 11th and the 12th. We started going lower still. But you all know that it was life-changing money to buy any day in the month of April.
Yeah.
And my biggest mistake was not holding that longer. Well, that's where I think we're at now. Final thoughts, Mark.
Yeah, look, I'm always keeping an eye on when we get to, people have asked two things in here, the altcoins, I'm always looking at TAO. I keep usually about 10% of my crypto through the bear market, and I stake it and I get more of it so that when I come out of the bear market and I buy in the lows to add to what I have, that I've got more of that altcoin. So TAO, I really like staking that. I don't hold it on exchange, of course, too risky. So I stake that and I earn more TAO. There's only 21 million supply. I like that Barry Silbert, who was telling everybody to buy Bitcoin at $11 and built his empire pretty much off the back of that with the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and now is looking to do the same with TAO. So I feel that could be a real big winner in the next bull market, and that will be my number one altcoin purchase in the bear market. And of course, I still have some, and I'm still doing it. And then I guess there was a question, quite a few questions here about the stock market and the election year. I know there's a little bit off crypto, but I came across an interesting stat, Josh, that if you had bought in the week of the midterm election date, or the date of the midterm election, which is always in November, between November 3 and November 8, under any president, it didn't matter, from 1942, your returns would have ranged from anywhere, but never a negative return by June. And your returns are anywhere between 5% and 30%. So I think there are some good buying opportunities coming up. Look, I think the low usually comes April to June. The high usually comes April to June historically. And then the low is usually at the end of September. And then people, I think, the smart people are buying the near the bottom or the lows. And then, but if you're a little late, and I think that's what came back in the story, even if you're a little bit to buy Bitcoin, even if you're a little late to buy the SPY in November when it usually dips and finds its bottom in the last week of September, historically, you're still going to come out green. So having that plan and strategy, I think, is very key in both stocks and crypto.
Yeah. One more comment I want to respond to that I think is a fair comment, but I want to explain myself. TMass31874 says, literally a week ago, Josh had Tim on his show and said Clarity Act won't do anything to help crypto. Now he says it will, always flip-flopping. Well, I don't know about the always flip-flopping, but I would tell you that it's the charts and the various possibilities and the comparisons of past price action that has caused me, studying that 2018 cycle, caused me to consider what could happen in the macro. Now, is it the Clarity Act that I am putting my confidence in? No. I think the Clarity Act, it may not bring clarity. It may bring clarity. I have no idea. But what I am seeing as a possibility is an overall macro that is not broken down, a very bearish sentiment that it might break down. And I'm just leaving the door open for all of the AI story to rip in April, May, June, and July, and then to begin to have the trouble, and that would bring up the risk on for Bitcoin and do something unexpected there, and that it would be tied to successes like the Clarity Act. I am largely cynical that, of the Clarity Act, and it wouldn't be the Clarity Act that would make the difference. But that is what would pump the story of Bitcoin. Largely, if you listen carefully to what I said today, I'm in agreement with Mark that what's going to really move the volatility of Bitcoin are the market makers going after liquidity, and that we have to be mindful of their motivation and what the overall macro could do. So yes, I think the Clarity Act could be given as a reason for why Bitcoin is going up, but it really isn't the reason. While people are believing that the Clarity Act is the reason, they're going after liquidity, and as soon as they get it, then they're going to crash it. And it won't have been. So even though it might be a little bit difficult to interpret what I shared from last week till today, if you're able to follow me, that's the explanation. I put very little value and emphasis in what Washington does. And really, I follow the old rule. If you want to understand things, look at where the money is. And right now,
follow the money.
Follow the money. That's what's driving my analysis.
Show me the money.
Yes. Appreciate you, Mark. You guys can find him on Tribal Trades.
Thank you so much.
And you can find both of us in the Stocks with Josh Discord. Appreciate you guys watching this video and sharing your Sunday with us. We appreciate each and every one of you. Peace and blessings, my friends. See you soon.
Thank you so much.